My name is Leo Thompson, and at 38 years old, I found myself standing at my mother's funeral, dreading the moment my brother Ethan would arrive. 6 years had passed since he stole Chloe, my millionaire fiancée, the woman I was planning to spend my life with. I hadn't seen either of them since. When they walked in, Ethan with that smug, practiced smile, and Chloe flashing a diamond ring that looked agonizingly familiar, I felt a calm I never expected. They were performing a role, one they had played for years. They had no idea I was no longer part of their audience, let alone who was waiting backstage to meet them. Before I tell you how my brother's face turned from smug satisfaction to the color of ash when he saw who I married, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join my journey. My mother, Eleanor, was always the glue that held our fragile family together. Growing up in a modest suburban home outside Boston, she was the one who taught me about strength, dignity, and the quiet power of resilience. She wasn't just a mother, she was my confidant, my advisor, and my biggest cheerleader. When she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 8 months ago, the foundations of my world disintegrated. She faced her diagnosis with a grace that shamed my own despair, more concerned about her family's welfare than her own suffering. Her final weeks were a blur of whispered conversations and shared memories in the home where she'd raised us. She slipped away holding my hand, her last breath a whispered plea for me to find peace in my life. 6 years earlier, when I was 32, my life had seemed perfect on paper. I had a successful career as a marketing executive, a nice apartment, good friends, but an underlying loneliness permeated everything. Then I met Chloe Reynolds at a charity gala. Chloe was a force of nature, charismatic, brilliant, and ferociously driven, a self-made tech millionaire at 36. Our connection felt electric, a meeting of minds and ambitions. We shared a love for art, travel, and grand goals. After our first date, at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the harbor, I called my mother and told her, with a certainty that felt like destiny, that I'd met someone special. Our relationship progressed at lightning speed. Weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, box seats at the symphony, and intimate dinners became our new reality. After 18 months together, during a private dinner on a yacht in Boston Harbor, surrounded by the glittering city lights, Chloe proposed to me with a stunning 5-carat diamond ring. I said yes without a flicker of hesitation. My parents were thrilled, especially my mother, who immediately began envisioning the perfect wedding. Then there was my younger brother, Ethan. Only 2 years my junior, we had a complicated, lifelong rivalry. Ethan always wanted what I had, from toys to friends to attention. If I achieved something, he had to match or exceed it. It was a tiresome, exhausting dynamic that our mother spent her life trying to mediate. Despite our history, at her urging, I chose him as my best man. This could be what brings you two closer, she'd said, ever the optimist. I wanted to believe her. I was painfully wrong. When I introduced Ethan to Chloe, he laid the charm on thick, complimenting her excessively. I noticed him touching her arm while laughing at her jokes, but dismissed it as Ethan being his usual sycophantic self. At our engagement party at my parents' home, I caught Ethan watching Chloe from across the yard, a look of intense longing on his face. When our eyes met, he quickly smiled and raised his glass to me. It felt wrong, but I pushed the feeling down, labeling it as my own insecurity. 3 months before our wedding, the subtle shifts in Chloe began. She started working later, her phone constantly buzzing with texts she'd wave away as international clients. Our usual Friday date nights were frequently rescheduled. When we were together, she seemed distracted, her attention divided between me and the glowing screen of her phone. Worse, she began to criticize things she once claimed to love about me. My sense of humor was now childish, my style too conservative, my love for reading before bed annoying because of the light. Meanwhile, Ethan started calling more frequently, always with questions about wedding details. Just want everything to be perfect for my big brother, he'd say, with a feigned sincerity that now makes my skin crawl. He volunteered to help with vendor meetings I couldn't attend, inserting himself directly into the fabric of our future. The turning point came one Saturday. I was cleaning Chloe's car before taking it to the detailer, as a surprise, and my hand brushed against something metallic between the passenger seat and the center console. I pulled it out. It was a cufflink, a unique, custom-made silver piece with a small sapphire. I had given it to Ethan for his 30th birthday. My blood ran cold. When I confronted Chloe that evening, holding the cufflink in my trembling palm, her face remained a mask of composure.
"Oh, that?"
she said smoothly, not missing a beat. Ethan must have dropped it when I gave him a ride to the florist last week. His car was in the shop, remember? Her explanation was plausible, too plausible. When I called Ethan, his story matched hers perfectly, as if rehearsed. The lack of any hesitation, any or ah, was more damning than a confession. 3 weeks before the wedding, armed with a knot of suspicion in my stomach, I decided to surprise Chloe at her office with lunch. Her secretary, Margot, a woman who had always been warm to me, looked up with wide-eyed panic. "Leo, we weren't expecting you. Chloe is in a very, very important meeting right now." Her gaze darted to Chloe's closed office door and back to me. "That's okay," I said, lifting the lunch bag. "I can wait." Actually, Margot stood quickly, physically blocking my path. She specifically asked not to be disturbed. Perhaps I could just let her know you're here. Something in her terrified eyes told me everything. "Is she alone in there, Margot?" Her hesitation was my answer. Before she could formulate a lie, I walked past her and pushed open Chloe's office door. The scene is burned into my memory forever. A silent, horrifying tableau. Chloe, leaning back against her mahogany desk, her hands tangled in my brother's hair. His arms were wrapped around her waist, their lips locked in a kiss that was not gentle or hesitant, but hungry and familiar. It spoke of countless stolen moments. For several excruciating seconds, they didn't notice me. The door clicked shut behind me, and they sprang apart. 3 faces, frozen in a triangle of shock, betrayal, and defiance. "Leo," Chloe recovered first, straightening her expensive suit jacket. "This isn't what it looks like." Ethan, to his credit, didn't even attempt such a transparent lie. He just lifted his chin, his expression a cocktail of guilt and defiance. "It just happened, Leo." A surprising, icy calm washed over me. "How long?" I asked, my voice steady, betraying none of the seismic chaos erupting inside me. Chloe glanced at Ethan, a flicker of strategy in her eyes. But Ethan answered. "For months," he said, his voice low. "Since the engagement party. Months. While I was tasting wedding cakes and writing vows, they had been betraying me in the most profound way possible." I dropped the lunch bag. The sound of the container hitting the floor was the only noise in the room. "I trusted you," I said, my voice barely a whisper, looking from my fiancé to my brother. "Both of you." I walked out, my dignity somehow intact, despite feeling shattered into a million pieces. The drive home is a black hole in my memory. I only remember calling my mother from my apartment, curled on the cold bathroom floor, my sobs so violent I could barely form coherent sentences. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. Canceling the wedding felt like dismantling a future, one vendor at a time. The cheerful wedding planner, the baker, the florist, each call was a fresh stab of humiliation. My father, his face red with a fury I'd rarely seen, wanted to teach that boy a lesson, and I had to use what little energy I had to calm him down, pleading with him not to make things worse. When I went to Chloe's apartment to retrieve my belongings, I found Ethan had already moved in. His clothes were in the closet, his photos on the shelves that once held mine. The efficiency of their union was breathtakingly cruel. I hit rock bottom. Boston became a city of ghosts. Every corner held a memory. Every familiar face looked at me with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. The scandal spread quickly. When a marketing director position opened in our company's Chicago branch, I applied immediately. It was an escape. Saying goodbye to my parents was heartbreaking. "You show them, kiddo," my father said, his voice gruff with emotion as he held me in a tight hug. "Build a life so good, they'll choke on their regret." My first year in Chicago was a lonely, gray existence. My studio apartment felt sterile, my life reduced to long hours at the office to avoid the crushing silence of being alone. I threw myself into work, my grief fueling a relentless drive. Then, at a technology conference in San Francisco, I was seated next to Clara Foster, a tech investor who had recently relocated from Seattle. Clara was everything Chloe was not. Where Chloe was a supernova, demanding all the light in the room, Clara was like a calm, steady star. She was understated, genuine, and possessed a quiet confidence that was magnetic. She listened more than she spoke. She emailed me the next day to continue a conversation we'd started about marketing trends. Over the next few months, we built a professional, then a personal, connection. She never pushed. On our third date, while discussing our pasts, the trauma of the betrayal came rushing back, and I had a full-blown panic attack. My hands shook, my breathing became difficult, and I felt the walls closing in. Instead of being embarrassed or annoyed, Clara moved to sit beside me, spoke to me in a calm, steady voice, and guided me through it. She didn't offer platitudes. She offered presence. That evening, I told her everything about Chloe and Ethan. She listened without judgment, then shared her own story of a painful business betrayal that almost ruined her. Broken trust leaves scars, she said, her eyes full of an understanding that went beyond words. Anyone worth your time will understand that healing isn't linear. Over the next year, we built a foundation of friendship first, then a slow, cautious love. Clara respected my boundaries and celebrated my independence. For the first time since the betrayal, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, trust was possible again. A year after my panic attack, on a trip to the Chicago Botanic Garden, Clara proposed to me. Her ring was an elegant, understated sapphire. It was perfect. We planned a small, intimate wedding. At my mother's urging, I sent Ethan an invitation. His brief, cold email response was all I expected. Mother's death brought us all back to Boston, to that funeral home. And so, I found myself standing with my father as Chloe and Ethan walked in. "Leo," Ethan said, turning to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "It's been a long time." "Yes, it has," I replied simply. He seized the opportunity for a private word, gesturing toward a small side room. Against my better judgment, I followed. Up close, I could see the fine lines of stress around his eyes. "You look thin," he remarked, his gaze assessing me. "Grief, I guess." He fiddled with his expensive watch. "Just so you know, Chloe and I are doing great. We just bought a summer house on Cape Cod, 8 bedrooms. Her company just acquired 2 startups. We're considering starting a family." His smile turned sharp, cruel. "I just thought you might want to know how well we're doing. Poor you. Still alone at 38. I got the woman, the money, the mansion. The familiar pain flared for a microsecond, an old phantom limb, then vanished completely. It was replaced by a profound, pitying clarity. He needed me to be miserable. His happiness depended on it. I smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile. "Have you met my wife yet?" His expression faltered, the smugness evaporating. "Wife." I opened the door to find Clara waiting patiently nearby. "Clara, come meet my brother, Ethan." As Clara entered the room, radiating a quiet grace, Chloe appeared in the doorway behind him, clearly having been watching our interaction. When the two women made eye contact, Chloe's face drained of all color. She knew exactly who Clara was. "Foster," she said, her voice a choked whisper. "Reynolds." Clara's tone remained professional, but coolly distant. "It's been what, 7 years? Not since Macintosh acquired Enotech, instead of your client CompuServe. Right, I heard that deal cost your investors a fortune." The barb hit its mark. Chloe swallowed visibly. Ethan looked between the two women, then at me, completely stunned, the pieces clicking into place in his mind. "You two are ... married. 2 wonderful years now," I confirmed, slipping my hand into Clara's, feeling the solid warmth of her fingers. "We met at a tech conference in San Francisco. Later that day, after the beautiful, heartbreaking service, I found Ethan alone in my parents' garden. There was no sign of Chloe. She left, he said, not looking at me. Said she had a headache and couldn't handle the reception. He finally looked up, his eyes raw. The whole thing, ... Our life, it's a lie, Leo. The dam broke. Words poured out between sobs. Chloe had changed shortly after their wedding, becoming controlling, critical, and paranoid about money. Her business had been struggling for years, a fact hidden by a carefully constructed facade of success. The houses, the cars, the vacations, all leveraged on a mountain of debt. Her acquisition of the startups was a desperate, failing gamble. I'm miserable, Leo, he confessed, the words torn from him. I have been almost since the beginning. She belittles me in front of her associates. She monitors my spending. This isn't a marriage. It's a business arrangement where I'm the junior partner. How could I admit what I'd done? I destroyed our family for a mirage. I thought having what you had would make me happy. I ended up with a caricature of your life and none of the substance. He was planning to leave her, consulting with a lawyer in secret. We weren't instantly healed, but as we sat there, sharing a childhood memory of our mother mediating a fight over a board game, something shifted. Her love was creating a fragile bridge across the chasm of our shared pain. Back in Chicago, 6 months after the funeral, Clara and I discovered we were expecting a child. The joy was immense, tempered only by the sadness that my mother would never meet her grandchild. Ethan and I now maintain a cautious but steady contact. He filed for divorce. The fallout was messy and public, but he's slowly rebuilding his life, authentically this time. The path that led me here was never one I would have chosen. Have you ever experienced a painful loss that eventually led you to something better? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, and if this journey resonated with you, please subscribe and share. Remember, sometimes the most difficult chapters lead to the most beautiful endings.